Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on creating a winning interview process to attract the best candidates. My name is Megan Berry. I'm on the marketing team here at Jazz, and I will be moderating today's discussion. Before we get started, I wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping items with everyone. First and foremost, we are absolutely recording the webinar today. We're going to make sure that everybody gets a copy of the slides and the recording tomorrow morning. So no fear. If we go too fast, if you have notes you want to take, don't worry, we will be sending this after. We're also accepting questions throughout the entire presentation. We will take all of them, as many as we can, at the end of the presentation. And there's a chat function on the lower left corner of your screen, and you can submit those at any time, and we'll be reading those as they come in. So lastly, if social media is your thing, you really like getting on Twitter, talking to people, feel free to join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag JazzChat, and you can follow us at jazz.co. And that hashtag is going to be at the bottom corner of all these slides, so no worries if you forget. So with that out of the way, we've got a full list of speakers here today that it's time to introduce. I want to start with Cassidy Coakley, International Recruitment Specialist at Tarico Holidays. Cassidy grew up in Long Island. She currently lives down in Florida. And we're actually just trying to catch up about, hopefully she's going to soon be a mom of an English Bulldog. Sounds like she's making some good progress. So thanks for joining us today, Cassidy.
Of course, glad to be here.
Yours truly will also be on the line today. A couple fun facts about me. I'm going to be a first-time auntie come January, and I'm very excited to a boy. His name will be George. And I grew up in Halloween's hometown of Salem, Massachusetts, which I always try to avoid this time of year because it gets so crowded. We also have Lila Razel here. She is our former customer success manager turned lifecycle marketing manager here at Jazz. Recently just saw her favorite band in concert, and she will be at the Benefits Z2 conference next week. If anyone on the line will be there, make sure you stop by and say hi to her. So thanks for joining, Lila.
Hey everybody, thanks so much, Megan. Happy to be on marketing and happy to still be talking to all the customers as well. So don't worry guys, I'm not leaving yet. I'm just helping out on a different side of the wall. So happy to see all the hellos coming in and the congrats. Thanks so much everyone.
Awesome. So before we dive into the presentation, I just wanted to give everyone a high-level overview of what we're going to get into today. We're going to start with discussing a good interview versus a bad interview. I know we all have so many opinions on what these are. So as we're going along with that, I would love to see what you guys think of a good interview versus a bad interview in the chat function. So send along if you're agreeing. If there's something we're missing, please send those along. We're going to follow that by the cost of a bad hire to the organization and to your team. We'll dive into why it's so important to make the candidate experience a positive one, and followed by some tips on how to make that happen. And as on all of our webinars, we will end with question and answer. So we'll jump right into it, and to help me, I've enlisted my friends, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we've all had those interviews where, 10 minutes in or so, the candidate, you can tell right off the bat the candidate is either in over their head or just not the right fit. But the candidates have all experienced that with an employer at one point or the other too, which I think a lot of us forget. So having a good or bad interview is not just on the candidate side, and it's totally on the employer side, but it's easily avoidable. So just because someone is a bad interviewer doesn't mean that the meeting was a waste of time. There are certain hard-to-interview personality types that really just need to be evaluated differently. So a few characteristics of a good interview are ones that are quick and efficient. They have relevant questions and timely follow-up, and both the employer and the interviewer are prepared. So not just the candidate coming with great questions, but the employer has read through their resume. They've thought up thoughtful questions to ask that are going to help them get to where they want to be. But the one I want to focus on for a minute here are the follow-ups and communications. Candidates want to hear from their potential employers, whether that is the hiring manager or the recruiter, before, during, and after the interviews. And if they don't, this can really be a deal breaker. They want to be prepared. As a candidate, they want to be prepared, but they can't do that if they don't have the proper information. They want to have an understanding of where they stand in the process and have proper expectations of when they should hear back, and they absolutely should always hear back. I will get on my high horse about that part later, but in terms of preparation, there are still a vast majority of companies that only provide an interviewer's name without titles, without their background, which doesn't help in the preparation process. So I'm going to let Cassidy talk to us a little bit about the bad interviews, since I'm sure she's seen more of those than I have.
Well, just like Megan said, good and bad definitely comes from both sides. So as the candidate, and then as you as the interviewer. So I definitely think one thing that makes a bad interview is non-conversational. So it definitely almost sounds like a script. So it's more formal. They really aren't giving you anything to work with, and it's just kind of a question and answer type of interview. Now, this could also be on your side as well. Maybe you're having a bad day and your head isn't 100% there when talking with the candidate. The next thing as well is the homework hasn't been done. This could be the candidate hasn't done the homework on necessarily the company or the position, almost as if they're blindsided and didn't really know where they were that day. And then also it comes on your end. So maybe coming into this interview, you didn't do as much homework as you possibly could have about the candidate and the position that they're in. You really didn't get to know and talk with the department and see what they're looking for and the culture that would be great for that office environment. The no communication before or after. Maybe the candidate didn't really respond efficiently before or after the interview and didn't really put in much effort or look as if they're really into the position and joining on with you all. But that also, again, could mean maybe you as the interviewer really didn't prepare the candidate or do any follow-up after or give them any feedback provided after the interview on their status and application.
Great, thanks, Cassidy. I also wanted to point out that nerves that come along with an interview shouldn't be dismissed either. Those can be deciphered for somebody not being a great fit, but nerves are a real thing during interviews. Some job seekers just find interviews very, very stressful. They're not able to relax and let their real personalities show because there's just so much on the line that they have to try to get across. And sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes 60, but a lot of times, you get that first 30 minutes on a phone screen. So there's a big barrier to get through. There are also plenty of hiring managers that just haven't perfected the interview process and starting to hire their teammates for the first time, and that's okay. It's obviously a learning process. But one last comment that I wanted to make, and that I hope you all keep in mind, is that the person doing the most talking is in fact the one being interviewed. And that goes both ways, whether the candidate is the one doing the talking or the employer. I know there have been some times, as a hiring manager, I've had instances where I'll walk away from an interview and say, wow, that candidate had such great questions, such a great conversation, but then I realized that I didn't get any answers to the questions that I had about the candidate. But alternatively, as a candidate, I found that I've done so much talking that I didn't get any of the questions answered that I wanted to about the organization. And I guess this just means that I apparently like to talk a lot, but that's besides the point. When you find yourself in a bad interview, though, take it in stride. Keep in mind it really could simply be nerves. Make the candidate comfortable enough so they're able to reveal how they'd be to work with. So just as you wouldn't want to hire someone because they fill one specific criteria on your job description, you also don't want to rule them out because of that either. So if after the first interview, you're still undecided, but you did tell the candidate, you set your expectations, you told them there'd be one in-person interview. If after that first one you've decided you do need some additional face time, it's okay to reset those expectations and ask them to come back in for another chat. Or find some additional time over the phone on a video call if that makes it easier. But making sure you're hiring the right person and making the best decision for your team and your business is better than hiring the wrong employee. Which brings us to our topic of what happens when you don't make the best hire. Hiring the wrong employee really can have more implications on your business than simply frustration. And the Harvard Business Review actually pointed out that about 80% of employee turnover is due to bad hiring decisions. I know I was floored by that number. That seemed really high. So there are real true costs both monetarily speaking and culturally speaking, that can have serious implications on your business when the right decision isn't made. But before we get into the costs of this bad hire, I thought it would be helpful to share what the definition of one is, because again, I think we're all going to have different definitions here. So and again, I would love for you guys to tell me, like, if you've had bad hires, what were those characteristics? Is there something missing up here? So feel free to send that in through the chat function. But again, let's be clear, this does happen to everybody, and nobody's perfect in making these hiring decisions. Mistakes happen. But there are some key signs, and I took all of these from a Career Builder survey of how businesses have previously defined a bad hire. 67% say lackluster quality of work. 54% say attendance problems, and this includes absences, tardiness, leaving early, etc. 60% say the wrong hires just are not collaborative with the rest of the team. This also can lead to cultural shifts within the entire organization, other employees not being able to work with them, willing or able, I should say, which can also lead to a decreased quality of work. 44% say complaints from customers are a sign of a bad hire, whether that's a decrease in the level of service they're being provided or the quality of the marketing materials that they're receiving. When your customers notice, it's time to take action. 59% say negative attitudes are a red flag. And this can once again lead to cultural shifts and lead to other employees not being able to work with them because of attitude changes. Finally, 44% say failure to meet deadlines are a sign, and it shows they're not taking their job seriously and don't have a sense of urgency in making sure clients are satisfied, sales are made, and the business is successful. I have a couple that are coming through, so I appreciate that. We have someone saying a misalignment with company core values. That's a big one. And super negative when asked about current employer. Wow, that's a good one too. So keep those coming. We'd love to see them. Cassidy, is there anything missing?
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with, the negativity. A big red flag for us here too is, asking why the sudden career change, what are they looking for in the next position, and they have negative things to say about their, current employer. So I definitely agree there with that person as well. And I think just, really having a lack of skills maybe you expected them to have, and, a lack of understanding about the role, repetitive referring to their old job, and just really not willing to adapt as well, I think are some of the things that would also possibly define a bad hire too.
Great. Yeah, we had someone, just chatted in and agreed with you on the lack of the actual required skills that they claim to have. That's a tough one to overcome for sure. So in this Career Builder survey, they had also solicited a lot of quotes from CEOs that had responded to the survey. And there was one in particular that sat with me that I'll read for you. Kevin Ryan, he's the CEO of Gilt Group, had said, "When I think of why people don't succeed, it's not because they don't have the technical skills. It's because of those intangibles that don't come up in the interview that are hard to judge." So he said this in response to the importance of checking references, not what we were just discussing, but I do think it fits here too. These 6 definitions aren't something you're going to be able to figure out in just one interview. You might be able to find a negative attitude, but not always. You might not even be able to figure them out in 2 interviews. But they're all something to just keep in the back of your head and consider how you'll address them in the interview process, whether that is with a reference check, the questions that are asked in the interview. So let's see. So now that we know what a bad hire is, we can talk about what those hires are costing your organization. I have a couple of different numbers up here for you because when I was doing some research on, the actual dollar amount cost of a bad hire, I found a ton of different numbers. So I picked 2, one that seemed on the lower side, one that seemed on the higher side. But as you can imagine, there are so many different variables that contribute to this number. So I figured I'd give you this range here. But the U.S. Labor Department estimates that it costs 1/3 of a hire's annual salary. The Society for Human Resources Management estimates it can cost up to 5 times the hire's annual salary. Both studies did agree on, though, and this was agreed upon across the board in every number that I found, was that the higher up in the organization the turnover is, And the longer they remain with the company, the higher the cost. So something to keep in mind. And of course, like anything, the tangible costs are so much easier to see than the intangible ones. Costs you can see include things like interview expenses, including hotel, travels, and meals, training, relocation costs, orientation, employment testing, and then even termination costs like COBRA, unemployment, and potentially even legal fees if the candidate decides to sue for any reason. But the biggest cost here is the need to repeat the entire hiring process to replace the wrong hire, which you've already spent countless hours and expenses on and now need to start from scratch. The harder to quantify costs include things such as lower employee morale, customer dissatisfaction, lost customers, lost sales, reduced quality of products and low production. And you'll also, it comes back to your current employees, you're also going to have them that witness this termination. They're going to start to question what caused it and how it affects them, including the increased workload that's going to fall on their shoulders that needs to be picked up with the absence of a teammate. So the long story short is the wrong employee immediately affects the bottom line. As Rosemary said here, VP of HR at Career Builder, and that can be easy to see. It can also be immediate, but it could take some time. So how does this happen and why does it continue to happen? I'm going to let our practitioner on the line today, Cassidy, I'm going to let her get into more details on this one.
Yeah, so definitely how a bad hire happens. Like Megan's mentioned multiple times already, we're not perfect. There's a lot of pressures that we have to deal with when filling a position. But like I said, I think we have all at one point or another felt the pressure to fill a position quickly as opposed to possibly filling it with the right person. So sometimes hiring managers request that we hire the best candidate in our candidate pool, and possibly ignoring that, maybe everyone in our candidate pool isn't exactly the right fit for the job. So I think that's definitely something to remember. If you need to fill a position and you don't think you have that qualified candidate in there, to keep on looking so this doesn't happen. And I think that definitely ties in with just didn't work out as well. And then regarding research employee skills, this is something I believe that can be easily fixed if you're on the fence with their skills, whether it's a technical role or anything other you might need to check, is really doing a skills assessment test. And I'd be happy to share who we use for that as well. But, you can definitely gear it for that position. And that way you can figure out what they know and what they don't know with data and the facts right in front of you. And then for the next is the reference check. So we're going to go over that a little bit in the next slide as well. You definitely don't want to have cookie cutter reference checks. And when that happens, you don't necessarily find out the valuable information that you will need. And then as mentioned earlier too, you didn't do homework on the role that much. And something we do here that I think has brought a lot of value to filling our positions is we have started to job shadow someone in that current position. And that way it allows you to figure out everything you need to know about the position, and that also helps you create a job description as well. You get to know the office culture, and you get to see really what they do on that daily task and daily job. And then, of course, you get to you should be meeting with managers and figuring out what their needs are. And we even sit in on interviews to determine what candidates they like and what candidates they don't like. And then for our last point, even though it does sound very elementary, you want to revisit the job description before you interview each candidate because you want to have that job description fresh in your head. So you want to go over everything that you're looking for, their skills, and make sure it does fit the company. And then for our next slide, so basic guidelines for better hires. So how can we definitely improve this and improve our hiring? So you want to definitely have data to make informed decisions. Like I said, using that skills assessment test as well will definitely help determine any skills that you're going to need for this position. And then, as I mentioned, you don't want to have cookie cutter reference checks. You want to ask for valuable feedback and ask questions that would pertain to this role. Create new questions questions for different roles and figure out what you need to find out that would fit the culture of that office. When we talk about setting clear expectations as well, you need to give your team an exact direction of what is needed and have good communication throughout. You can't just say, find me the best candidate. You need to give clear expectations. Creating a positive experience is so big, and that really does start with the job description all the way to the end result. Something we do here is just greeting them when they come to reception and making them feel comfortable right away before they were to go into the interview. Keeping them updated in a timely manner about their process and being realistic, and just letting them know their end result no matter what in a positive way. That way they can walk away feeling good about the whole interview process. And then as mentioned here, you need to remember and not to assume that the candidate will say yes, because they can still say no. So that's why you need to still be engaged throughout the whole process and making them feel comfortable. And then for our next topics, we're just going to go ahead and talk about the importance of a strong candidate. So for this slide, we're going to talk about employee engagement. So like I said, that really does start before, during, and even after recruiting. So before we get started on some of the bullet points, I'll go ahead and just read the quote, how only 30% of employees describe themselves as engaged. The other 70% either neutral or actively disengaged, willing to jump ship at any time. So we definitely don't want that to happen. We want to improve that 30%, that number there. So I definitely think throughout the whole process, you want a point of contact throughout the interview. That way the candidate isn't getting confused, nothing's getting mixed up. They're heading in that right direction from A to Z. I've had some candidates tell me that, when going through an interview process, they were in contact with 4 to 5 different people, having different people, interview them and then also email them, so things can get a little confusing, which can definitely turn away a candidate. And like I mentioned before, it really does start with the job descriptions. You want to make sure that they are 100% the truth of what this job will entail, and is it realistic. You don't want a candidate to be so engaged in that job description and so excited and then really find out that this isn't what the job is going to be like. Something I've mentioned already is definitely job shadow. Get to know that position and create a job description off of that. You want to figure out throughout the whole process, where is this person going? Where are their goals? Does this position really match up with the company needs? And, some of these questions that you could even ask them are, what's your career objective? What are you seeking to accomplish in your career or in this position? And really make sure that they line up with the company and the position they're applying for. Determining if the candidate is a cultural fit really does come down to getting to know them in the interview, and also finding out what the office environment is like, and are they going to fit working in that office? Do you get along with certain personalities, and do they butt heads with others? And that's actually something you can ask them in the interview. What kind of work environment do you like to be in? Do you like to be in a serious, a laid-back, collaborative? Are you more of an independent person? That's something we definitely ask throughout our process.
Great. Thank you, Cassidy. I think it's really important to keep in mind that employee engagement does start during recruiting. I think it's a common misconception. Misconception that engagement really can only happen once they're an employee. But if you are not keeping them engaged and up to date during the hiring process, you are missing your very first opportunity, like Cassidy mentioned, to connect with them and get them excited about your organization.
And essentially, why should you care? Of course, you want to find the best talent for your company because, as Megan mentioned earlier, this costs a company up to 5 times a bad hire's annual salary. And it can cost your company even more if they stay longer in that role. So you definitely want to find the best talent. And of course, a part of our job and our position is to reduce the recruiting time and cost. And really, I think this is just because a prolonged time to hire really does mean the opportunity is lost and people you are passing up on and resources wasted. You know, and if you definitely hire the best of the candidate pool, you're going to have a business competitive advantage no matter what, and your competition is going to be wondering what exactly are they doing in that office. And then another thing I do want to just touch on quick too is just, you know, definitely social media in the 21st century and word of mouth. You know, your past, present, and future candidates, whether you like it or not, are definitely looking at social media. And I really think that, you know, spreading word of mouth definitely in a positive light will definitely also help your company in the long run. And hopefully, you know, if they didn't get the position with you, they could refer a friend if they had a positive experience.
Great. Thank you, Cassidy. And as promised, we wanted to wrap up today with some actionable tips for you to really improve your interview process, create a winning one, and attract the best candidates. Because, you know, as we did just kind of hammer into your head here, those first impressions really do make or break the process. And to start with one that we've harped on quite a bit so far is preparedness. Preparedness is key for candidates and the interviewer, but I wanted to focus on this slide. I wanted to focus on the interviewer's preparedness since that is who we have on the line today. It's so important to have a list of questions that you want to ask prior to these interviews. There are plenty of questions that come up and happen organically, but having something strong to start off with, we recommend having a mix of behavioral, fact-based, hypothetical, and left field questions. Fact-based questions are easy, should be very easy to answer. Questions like, tell me about yourself, although I personally find that question really difficult, and what was your last job can be two good questions to break the ice and make the candidate feel comfortable early on in the conversation. Behavioral questions like, how did you lead a group of people at your last job? Or tell me about a time when you overcame a workplace obstacle to meet a deadline. Helps you dig into their personality and asks questions about things that they're likely going to be repeating in this role. Hypothetical questions can be extremely frustrating for both sides, but I think they give you an insight into how the candidate really can think through a problem. Like, how would you deal with personality clashes among team members? Left field questions are typically unexpected, weird, a lot of times irrelevant, but can uncover the candidate's personality, like, would you rather live on the moon or on Mars? Or what books have you read lately? I've actually had to answer what books you've read lately so many times, and too many times I have been unprepared for it. So that is personally a standard interview question that I always make sure that I prepare for now. But being prepared also means meeting with everyone on the hiring team to make sure that you agree on goals, descriptions, and roles that you'll be playing in the interview. So it doesn't show you're prepared if the same question is being asked by each person conducting an interview. So make sure that you're meeting with the team ahead of time, defining your roles, defining the overall goal that you're trying to achieve with this candidate so that you know how to get there. And lastly, making a list of assessment benchmarks to help you keep these interviews on track, and make sure that you're using them to your advantage. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to be able to conduct a good interview. So if everyone has the same set of assessment benchmarks, come together as a team after and see what's checked off or what's not is a good way to make sure that your team is being collaborative.
And then definitely for another tip to keep in mind is keeping to a schedule. So like I said earlier, you don't want to feel rushed. You definitely want to have a goal and have a deadline, but if you truly don't believe you have that perfect candidate in your candidate pool, then don't rush. Keep looking. If you're on the fence with one candidate, just realize there's a candidate out there that you won't be on the fence with, and you'll know that they are the perfect candidate for this position. You want to keep candidates updated on their application so they stay interested and stay engaged. You can't expect a candidate to accept the position with you if they haven't heard back from you in a week or two. They probably have moved on by that point because they're looking for a job and a career. So definitely checking up, letting them know, maybe the process is taking a little bit longer, but we're still interested. It definitely helps later on when you do have to make that decision. My biggest thing is, setting proper expectations. You don't want to give a timeline if you realistically know you can't stick with it. You want to definitely give them a good idea of when they should hear back from you, and the time that it might take to get through the whole process. Because if you give them an answer and you don't really stick with it, then it could also look bad on your part as well. And then lastly, you just want to enforce this with your whole team so that everyone is on the same page. You don't want to be the only person on your team, sticking to a schedule and updating candidates. You want to all come together as a team so you can definitely make this process smoother. And like mentioning team, you want to work together as a team. So if you haven't already, then definitely define a recruiting team and assign everyone a clear and different role. So that also comes into having common goals but different ways of getting these. So one thing we do here is each of us use a different job board site that we post at. So we're not all posting on the same job boards. We're not all going through the same candidate pool. So you can just do little things like this to help the process definitely get broken up differently as well. And you definitely want to work as a team with the hiring managers as well to discuss evaluations. So set up regular team check-ins. So we do about twice a week here with our team, and it really does help us keep involved and keep everyone up to date. And it just has us all on the same page. That way nothing gets lost and everything is updated. And then you definitely want to let your team know exactly what you're looking for. So like I said, don't just say we're looking for the best candidate. What is the best candidate? Create a job description if you need to of the perfect candidate to help you really find that candidate that will be the best fit for this position in your company. And then you definitely want to consider the candidate. We've all been there. We've all had to go through interviews. So you want to put yourself in their shoes. We've all had good and bad interview experiences. So I would suggest maybe make a list of some of the best and some of the worst interviews you've ever had to do or you've ever had to sit in. And how can you improve this for a candidate? Look through it in their eyes. The candidate is your number one priority, and really realizing that will help your process and give you a different mindset. So you want to keep them front and center at all times. And I really think this ties into as well thinking about what is beneficial for the applicant and for the company as well, because it will definitely help in the long run. And then, definitely doing those small gestures to make them feel welcome from the moment they step in the door to the moment they walk out of that office. Because they'll always remember that positive experience they had with that company, and they'll definitely spread that around whether they got the job or not. And respect their time. I hear a lot of times that recruiters or hiring managers get annoyed with candidates checking in about their application, but maybe that's also something that you could be doing differently there. Have you been updating them? When was the last time you contacted them? Just be considerate, definitely when they're looking for their possible career and, job for themselves or for their family. And then for our last tip, we're just going to go ahead and talk about using technology to your advantage through this whole process. So it is the 21st century, so if you aren't on board already, I think it's time to definitely start utilizing all the different, different channels out there we have with technology. I think the first thing possible is, updating your emails and signatures with corporate videos and showcasing company culture. Get with your marketing department or even take it upon yourself by putting together a video of what it's like to work at your company and share it with your candidates. I think that's really helpful for them to see what a day in the life of a sales or product manager in your company, what they do. Jazz does an awesome job, I think, by giving you a template when candidates first apply by stating, "Thank you for applying for X job. We will get back to you shortly." And I think that's a great opportunity there to give your candidates resources and tools to keep them busy while they wait to hear back from you. And another thing we're very big on here at Tarico is using video interviewing. I really think as an international company, it helps us conduct our interviews all around the country, all around the world. And, I think using tools such as Skype gives you that flexibility for you and for the candidate because let's face it, we're both very busy people probably. Video interviewing can help, definitely bring your recruiting to that next level if you do need it, and definitely help streamline the process and connecting employers, with candidates a lot faster because this definitely enables you to connect with people wherever and whenever. I've had people do interviews with me in their car, but it's okay. They have lives, they're busy, and as long as they're professional and they take it seriously, then I'm okay with that. Use skills tests to figure out, I think definitely skills assessment tests to figure out whether, they are a fit for that position and job, especially if it's a technical position. Definitely give them that skills assessment test regarding what you're looking for. And then lastly, of course, use an applicant tracking system such as Jazz here today. So, Tarico's been with Jazz for about 3 years and counting, and it's cut down our time more than a half when dealing with job postings, candidate interviews, and handling any reports we might have to, administer. We recently had to do a company presentation about the different sources we use, and luckily, since we use Jazz, we just had to do a couple clicks here and there to figure it out. I also think, speaking of interviewing, I think it's great for setting up the different workflows for the different positions that you have open in your company. And then another thing about creating that positive candidate experience, you can actually create questionnaires to be sent out after the interviews to see how that interview went and what they thought about it. And you can really see their feedback, and it's anonymous, and you can see what you could improve on. So that's actually something that we've been recently doing, and it's helped us a lot as well.
Great. Thank you, Cassidy. That was great. I just wanted to give Lila a quick intro. I know she's been, she's been with us this whole webinar, but she's been a little quiet. So this is Lila's time to shine, and I just wanted her to give us a little more detail into Jazz's interviews and assessments feature.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I was super excited to talk about it, so I just had to bowl over Megan here. So I know Cassidy had talked a lot about some of the functionality that she's used in Jazz in order to get a lot of the results that she's looking for and help organize the interview process. So if you aren't using Jazz right now at all, you may want to get some more information on our website, jazz.co, or head over to sales@jazz.co or hello@jazz.co to get some information. And if you're already a customer with us, you can reach out to support@jazz.co or check out our knowledge base and do some searching on interviews. And what it allows you to do is totally customize your interview process and provide that consistent feedback across different hiring managers, across different jobs, and actually prepare them and give them the questions they need to be asking in the interview automatically right within the system. And everybody's feedback is visible within Jazz as well. And then this is also reportable. So you can go into reports, you can check out your interview bias. So if you've got someone who's failing everyone, you can take a look at that and be like, all right, well, maybe we need to have a little discussion or a little training on how to interview properly. So it's really great that this is just integrated in your system, and if you're, like I said, if you're a Jazz user already on our Pro plan, and if you're curious to get in about any of those questions, you can head over to support@jazz.co and they'll be able to help answer those. But if you're not using this right now, you definitely want to get started using it. Even if it's just for HR purposes, like your internal phone screens, your initial phone screens that you're doing in your initial contacts with the candidate, this can help with phone screens as well. So I would definitely recommend getting some more information on that, or just getting started and adding in some test interviews and test candidates to get this ball rolling, because it's really going to help talk to a lot of the points that Cassidy and Megan have covered today.
Great. Thank you, Lila. That's awesome. So before we formally wrap up into Q&A, I have a couple of just lasting thoughts that I wanted to leave you all with. If there are 3 things that you take away from today's presentation, I hope it's these 3. Firstly, the candidates are interviewing you too. I know we talked a lot about that at the beginning. It's not just your opportunity to make sure they're right for your company. It's their opportunity to make sure that their skills are appropriate for the role they're looking for and that they can advance their career with your organization. Number two, you have to contact all applicants regardless of the result. And yes, I know you get hundreds of applications for one position, but that person, that individual took the time and the energy, however in-depth your application process is, to show you that they're interested. So you really should be contacting everyone with the outcome, even if that outcome is that they didn't make it to the first round. And lastly, always be refining and enhancing your process. It should never be the same for every candidate and should be different for every single role. This means the amount of interviews, the people they meet with, the questions that are asked, and the length of time. So those are just a few things I wanted to make sure you all left with today. So we're getting closer and closer to some question and answers, but I wanted to share a couple additional resources with you all. I know that you cannot click on these links right now, but as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be sending out a copy of the slides and the recording. We'll include all of these resources in it, but there's another great webinar coming up next week that Lila is going to be running with, so you'll hear a familiar face on there. But building a candidate pipeline, so making sure that you have plenty of candidates to choose from. So with that, we're finally ready for Q&A. We had so many come in. There was one, we had Becky from Gravitational Marketing send us a comment in, and it's not a question, but I thought it was a great idea that I wanted to share with you guys. And she said they're testing a different means in identifying their talent, and they conducted a recruitment event last month and signed up 15 people for a full paid day in their offices. So these are people that are interested in working, to my knowledge, at her company. To prepare, each candidate received a detailed email with links to our blog, our website, and other documents to review. And we ended up with a group of 8 people who lasted the full day, and of that 8 people, hired 3. So she said it was so successful that they're doing it again next month. So hopefully, Becky, you can write into us and let us know how that went, how those 3 people are doing. We would love to hear about that. So I just wanted to share that because I thought that's a really, I always say, I wish you could intern at a company for a full day before deciding. I think that's so important, but it's obviously not possible everywhere. So making that a reality, I think, is a great idea. So thanks for sharing that. The first question we have, I'm actually going to direct towards Lila. Cassidy talked about this a little bit, but maybe Lila, you can go into the details on how it's done. But candidate experience polls and measurements through Jazz, how do those work, and at what point in the process can you implement them?
Yeah, absolutely, and Cassidy kind of touched on it like you said, and I'm super excited that she's using it that way because I am jumping down everybody's throats that I talk to on the phone or have any interactions with about using questionnaires in the workflow to create a recruiting process survey is what I call it. But you can call it basically whatever you want, a candidate experience survey, whatever makes sense for you guys. And what you would do is go in and create a questionnaire within Jazz and then add it to one of your not hired statuses. And then it'll automatically send this questionnaire out to your candidate as an email that they can fill out in a web form. And it filters right back into Jazz, and then you can report on that information. So you can run reports on questionnaires and answers, so you can create things like a rating from 1 to 5. You can provide them a space to put in their feedback in a paragraph text. So it's really, really helpful in getting that actionable feedback so you guys can make your recruiting process a lot better. So I'm really glad that A, someone asked that, and B, Cassidy had already brought it up since it's kind of a flag that I've been waving ever since we introduced those auto questionnaires. So yeah, it's definitely a combination of making a questionnaire and using it on the workflow.
Perfect. Thanks, Lila. Cassidy, next one is over to you. Do you have a recommended limit for number of steps in an interview process?
Yeah, so it's different for every company, so I don't want to give, an exact number. It definitely, I think, depending on the position, if it's a senior level position, someone who could possibly be a C-level executive, I think there's definitely a lot more processes in that. But, I think it really just comes down to, if it is an extensive process, maybe more than 4 steps, that your candidate is very engaged and you are doing everything you can possibly do to make it simple and keep them engaged and have that good communication. Because I really think the communication and the interest gets lost a little bit if it's anything further than maybe 4 or 5 steps. But like I said, if you need it to be longer than that, then that's where you really have to be on your A game and stay in contact with the candidate and make sure that they know you're still interested in them. This is just how the process is working, and you just need to be in full communication with them at all times.
Great. Thank you. Let's see here. What's next? You had mentioned that you use an assessment testing tool for your candidate. Can you share who that is so that people on the line can look into those if they're interested?
Yeah, of course. It's called eSkill, so just eSkill. So if you just type that into Google, I'm sure it will come up.
Great. Let's see. What would you say is the most effective way to share feedback with candidates that you don't hire?
Yeah, so I think definitely the most effective way, I kind of believe I said it earlier, is just staying positive. Definitely staying positive if you do have to give them the bad news. And that can definitely be something hard to do. But, I think just giving them that phone call instead of an email really goes a long way. Because also when you're talking to someone, it definitely limits on maybe what they say, because in an email people can say whatever they want. But if you really give that voice, a human voice in communication, I think speaking over the phone is the best way to handle situations and just being respectful. If they've come in for an interview and, they've gone through multiple processes with you, if they are in the area, then I would definitely maybe bring them in and sit them down and give them feedback on, why maybe necessarily you went with another candidate. But that doesn't mean down the road isn't going to be a position open that they could possibly fit into.
Great, thanks. Lila, we're going to send this next question your way. Who should be assigned to quote-unquote grade skill assessments when time is precious and recruiters don't often have the knowledge base to effectively determine the best candidate based on this information?
Oh yeah, awesome question. So there's a couple different ways you can kind of assess candidates without having to grade them. Within Jazz, the interviews feature will show all of the thumbs ups and thumbs down and who passed and failed this person. And the hiring manager or the HR person in charge of recruiting for that role can create those interview guides. So they're really the ones that are mastering and owning the questions that are being asked. It's not something that, the individual hiring managers could, or recruiters or interviewers can take ownership of and have to go back and grade. It'll all kind of be taken care of in your ATS. The same goes for evaluations, which is another feature within Jazz that you can set up in order to basically automatically grade candidates based on a series of assessments. Or you can use an external provider like Cassidy mentioned, like eSkills or Interviewed, Skill Survey. Those are some other ones if you guys want to check those out. And what you do is you really just set up these assessments, and then the system automatically grades it for you. So it's super, super helpful. Obviously, I'm going to plug the stuff that we have built into Jazz, but there are a ton of options out there as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Lila. Cassidy, let's see here. Do you think there's a significant benefit so you obviously talked a lot about how, you bring in, you do a lot of Skype interviews, but do you think there's a benefit to bringing candidates in for an interview versus hosting one online, taking your company and the candidate into consideration?
I really do, and this is, my personal opinion, I really do think Skype interview, especially if you have a lot of positions open, you have a lot going on, I really do think they are, just as beneficial as if bringing someone into the office. If they're a local candidate and they're right down the road, definitely bring them in. But if it's someone an hour or 2 hours away, do that first interview over Skype. And if you're feeling good about them, then go ahead and bring them into the office. But I really do look at them both equally. So I definitely think bringing the candidate in is beneficial. And then, like I said, it's the 21st century, so we're definitely moving more towards technology. So I think Skype can also be looked at equally the same.
Perfect. We have time for about one last question here. And this question I'm going to take a stab at, but I would love Lila or Cassidy to jump in if I'm missing anything. Excuse me. The question is, I'm hiring for a position that requires writing examples, publications, blog posts, etc. I explained it in the interview process. I've had more than a few individuals not get back to me. Should I be chasing them for their work? My personal opinion is absolutely not be chasing them for their work, because think about if they are the one to be hired, are you going to be chasing them for their work when they're a full-time employee? So that is just my caution to the wind tale. But Cassidy or Lila, if you have anything to add, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you. Obviously they received your email. They've already been in contact with you, so now they're just kind of going ghost and not really responding to your emails. I don't necessarily know what you say or what emails are sent out or how you go about this, but maybe also you could take a look at if there's maybe something else you could do or how you approach it or ask them. Maybe at first it's just asking for one thing, and then, going off of that, if, that is up to your standards, then maybe the next step in the process would to be send the next one. That way you kind of already get them on the hook and they're already sending you work. Maybe, like I said, I don't know how much you ask for them, but maybe all at once it is maybe just possibly a little overloading if you ask for 3 or 4 pieces of work. But like Megan said, if they really want the job as well, I don't think you really should have to chase after a candidate, because there's plenty of other candidates out there that will want this position with your company. Exactly.
No, that's a good point. There are plenty of other candidates out there. So that is all the time we have left for today. Cassidy and Lila, thank you very, very much for joining us, sharing all of your tips, and thank you everyone on the line for being here and sticking with us. So as I mentioned many, many times, we will be sending out the recording and the slides tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out for those, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.